hooking this time. Wow, we've upgraded.
What's that?
See if we can hook it.
Well, it's holiday season.
Ah. We got pepperoni. Cheese.
Actually, I think strategic hiring.
Actually, I probably wouldn't go back there.
You wouldn't?
I probably would.
Oh.
I would consider it. I don't know. I don't know. I still
Hey,
don't know.
Chris.
what to
How are you?
Rachel.
Good.
She just burned out. She's not even going into another development career. She's going to try to do something else.
Yeah, at this time.
Really?
Yeah, she reached out to me to see if we were hiring, and then she just told me,
John said he kind of taught me.
Jason's already moved on.
Jason's up there?
He took another job.
Oh, wow. John said he thought maybe she heard Chuck clash or something. He didn't know.
Well, I'm sure there could be a reason why she burned out.
Yeah. I don't know.
So, Arissa, I see you actually got one of the ugly sweaters this year, which isn't actually all ugly.
Yeah, that's not bad. I like the clippy one that they had last year, but that was a minesweeper.
But that one sold out super quick.
Did they have upgrades for this one?
Well, that's like I was calling earlier, like, when I got this, I actually had like a reminder set on my phone to check the site every morning. And while I was up in Cleveland for a concert on like the night of the 28th,
Mhm.
I couldn't get to sleep, and I just happened at like 12:30 or something. I happened to I couldn't get to sleep, so I checked the site real quick, and it had like just posted. I literally finished my order, went back to the page, and it was sold out. Oh wow! I was like, oh, right.
Yeah. Yeah, I know they said it sold out quicker than any others.
Which kind of surprised me. I would have thought the flipping one would have sold out. Like,
Well, they always sell out, but this one just sold out. Because like I say, it's actually not that ugly. So,
What's it for?
it's
just something you do every year.
Oh, like a sock. Okay.
It's
Fun
always
for
like a
dividends.
charity thing.
Gotcha.
All right. So one quick announcement. If you're walking past the camera, please be careful. I don't have the clip to attach it to the tripod, so it's just my camera's just sitting on the top, which mostly means Richard, be careful. Yes. All right. So today we're going to talk about, let me do my pre-slides because I didn't build the pre-slides, but so definitely want to thank our sponsors. So Akotis. See, my slides actually had been updated for their logo, but I didn't put them up today. For the spot, and then Tech Systems for the food. Trying to think. So upcoming events. So sure enough, in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is, I don't know. Time is irrelevant to me right now. Second week of January is Code Mash. I do know they still have tickets because they're begging for people to attend. Attendance is definitely down. So that's definitely a lot of fun. I know Arissa will be there because she's going to be talking about so about to say event-driven architecture. That's what I'm doing.
Reasonable accommodations.
Yeah.
It's actually going to be the first time I get that talk anywhere.
Oh, cool.
So it should be interesting.
And then I'll be doing an all-day workshop on event-driven architecture, and then I'm doing my Tech That talk. So, and then one other last thing. So, sure enough, afterwards, we actually have a choice. So we can keep on going to BJ's, or there is, and I can't remember the name, Twin Peaks. So there is that option.
That parking lot was full. I drove by there today.
Well, because of the game. But the game would start at 6. So by the time we're finishing up, the game's still gonna be going on. But so I don't know. We definitely can take the option. With that being said, definitely want to be understandable. Twin Peaks might not be the right place because it's the women are not the way how they're dressed there, right? It's not Hooters crazy, but it's it is similar type idea. So I leave it up to everyone. So with that, we're going to talk about C# and what's new in C#. I'm gonna mostly talk about C#. Talk a little bit about things in .NET, things in ASP.NET, EF Core. I will say, so this is a funny thing. I am normally way behind on building my slides for presentations. Like I'm usually, like it's not unusual for me to be building the day before. All the ideas are in my head. This one I actually built like a month ago. And since then I've written a whole nother talk, whole nother regular conference talk and a whole all-day workshop. So I've kind of forgotten what I had in here. So we'll both be re-experiencing this at the same time. With that being said, I've been using .NET 8 a lot for the workshops I've been building. So, all right. So for those who have not met me, my name is Chad Green. I am now the senior software architect at a company called Jasper Engines. Shocker, they're in Jasper, Indiana. Actually, really cool work we're doing there. Lots of modernization. And then all my contact information. Oh, and I will say, I got the brightness better on the projector, so hopefully we're not going to turn off the lights like normal. Because when I turn off the lights, then the stream can't see, they just see a dark screen. All right, so pretty much talk about. We're going to talk about C#. We're going to talk about .NET 8, ASP.NET Core, and Engine Framework. So some big things in C#. I'm trying to remember. Let me look at this real quick so I remind myself. Okay, yeah. Like I said, it would have been good if, like, even when I got here, if I looked at my slides again. But yeah, so some big things that they changed. All right. So let's talk about these. Number one, the primary constructor. So this is really cool. So normally you have your class, and then you have your constructors, one or more. And actually, a lot of times we don't do a whole lot of constructors. Like a regular Poco generally don't have constructors anymore because we've made other improvements in .NET. But think about especially like if you're doing dependency injection, and so you have constructors going in there. And one of the things they did was basically got rid of that constructor. So the way you can think about this, and that's kind of dark right now. I'll show this better when I go into code. But if you look at the top line, all right. So I've got this bank account. I don't know why I called it bank account 0, but I have this bank account, and right there in my class definition, string account ID and string owner. Right. So very similar. They took this off of what they did for records. Is how they kind of did this. And then account ID and owner are now properties of that class. Right. So you automatically that property. So it's nice because I got the well, I shouldn't say they're fields. Right. So they're not public properties. So they're fields. That's the correct way of saying that. So I can use them right away. So this is really nice. It's actually, I saw someone on Twitch, or not Twitch, but Twitter the other day, talking about how one of his team members, went through and took all the classes and put primary constructors on there, and saved like 500 lines of code or something like that, just by making a simple change. And that's why they put it in, right? It is the idea of let's reduce the amount of code. It makes the code a little bit easier to read, especially if you're coming from other languages, because other languages do things similar to this. Now, there's a big gotcha with this, and that is, especially if you're doing like dependency injection, where you're expecting that to be in a read-only property or read-only field. Well, these are no longer read-only. I can now change those. So again, if I injected something, I can now, that it should be a read-only, so that I'm acting on that. I can now actually, I could change that value. So that's one of the things you definitely have to be concerned with. I'll show how I'm handling it. So it's not so bad, but because we'll get into demos here at the end of each section. I'll go into the code. So important part, view these as parameters, right? So again, they're not exactly fields per se. There really are parameters coming in. And then, it's not going to be stored if they're not needed. They're not actually members of the class. So it's kind of a weird thing. They can be assigned to, which is what the problem I was talking about with like your dependency injection. And again, except for record types, because records are different, right? But they don't become properties. Now, same thing in a record. If you're doing a record, they are properties, right? But again, a record is not a class, right? Well, again, funny thing is a record actually is a class when it gets down to IL, but in the C# code it is not a class. And then the other thing you have to think about is that, once you've done this, you now have to call that primary constructor. So if you add another constructor in there, it now has to, just like if you have like an abstract class, it's inheriting. It works the same way. That has to now call that. So, but I generally, again, what I've seen so far is, generally these are things that where, my constructor, I just had generally one constructor that was pulling in like these dependency injection. Again, those who know me know I do a lot of stuff with Azure Functions. And so I do a lot, it's a lot of dependency injection. And so it has definitely made, I've been able to clean up my function code, right? That's one of the things I really like about it. So I probably write, an argument to the base constructor invocation, initialize member fields of properties, so forth. All right, so the next one. And again, like I said, I'll go into code here a little bit. It sucks to go from slides to code each slide. So collection expressions. So this is basically, they made collections a little bit easier to work with. I don't know. Microsoft was really big about expressions. They add expressions everywhere. And honestly, half the time I find it harder to read, even though it's less code. And I'm definitely a big fan of less code. Prime examples like the range expressions, like if I do something like if I say, take the substring, length of the string -5 or whatever. It wants to, Visual Studio say, hey, you really should do this length expression. And I find that it's .5 or whatever. I never can remember it, right? I'm like, I can't read that. I can't remember what that means. So funny thing is they're really big in these. Actually, what they've done with collections make a whole lot of sense. So you can specify this initial value. It is cool. Like even if I'm just, building an empty list, or an empty collection, it is, I don't even have to have the new keyword now. All right. I can say, list string foo equals and then square bracket. And that's it. So I actually like that, right? It is a whole lot nicer because again, that new is just kind of in the way. I don't really need to, I do need to know that it's new enough. Other than that, I don't need to know much. So here's a prime example how you can see this. This is a pure array, right? So int, in array A, and then I'm going ahead and putting my values in there. And again, you could do this beforehand, right? I mean, there was shorthand code, but it was more. There was more to it, right? So they just made this a lot simpler. So that's really nice. I'm looking down my notes to see if anything else. Yeah, and then they talked about you can use a spread element. That's what I was talking about, like with, when I do my substrings, they always tell me use a spread element. I never know how to read that. But I'm also an old guy, so that could be that too. All right, so the ref read only parameters. So this is interesting. This honestly, I don't know how much people are going to really use this a whole lot. Again, you got to remember a lot of things that Microsoft adds to C# is from Microsoft. And so, you'll see me sometimes, I'll tell you, do not use this, right? And there'll be something at the end where I'll say, don't even bother using this. It's here. But so if you think about, so back in 7.2, so, we're now on 12, 13. I never even remember what version we're on. But, so they added in the in parameters, right? As a way to pass in read-only references, all right? And, these work great, but they, sometimes the compiler would get confused as to how to handle whether it's, coming in or it's out and so forth. So that's why we you've got this ref read-only, all right? Again, I really don't think a whole lot of people are going to end up using this. There we go. We have drinks. Well, it's not your fault. And so for those who don't know, the delivery guy got here and didn't realize he forgot to bring the drinks. But then blamed other people in the company because apparently he didn't pack his own deliveries. So yeah, like I said, I don't really foresee a whole lot of usage of this, but it's there. Next one is another thing that I don't know how many are going to use this, but so now we have default lambda parameters. So for example, I can do using point equals int x int y. Again, I don't know a whole lot of people who even use. I mean, these are getting to the tuple worlds here. I don't see a whole lot of people doing this type of stuff, but it's here, right? And I now have an easier way of defining these things.
Hey, Chad, I'm gonna head
All right, thanks, Andy.
out. Just have a good night, all right?
Okay.
And again, this is another one of these features where this was added because it's in other languages, right? And one of the things that Microsoft's really big about right now is trying to make C# more friendly to people from other, come from other languages, just so that so they can grow, right? It really boils down to they're not going to grow native C# developers more. They need more people to come from others to grow the language. So there's that. Inline arrays. So let me remember what oh yeah, this is used by the runtime team. So guess what? None of us are ever going to use this, right? I mean, this is another thing where half the stuff that was added in this version is the next one. This one is interesting. Again, this is something added by Microsoft, but I know I will use this at some point. So you got the experimental attribute. So think about it. We've had, I can't remember when they added, but the obsolete attribute might have been since day one. I can't remember. No. But here's the problem with the obsolete attribute, right? The obsolete attribute is it's obsolete, right? It's not, hey, we're planning on going obsolete. This is, it's still here, but you really shouldn't use this, right? Well, think of the other way around. I'm adding new code, right? But it's not done. It's done enough that I can start checking in, but it's not really ready for production use, right?
So in other words, this is a way of getting beta testing done.
This is more of how to, honestly, think about where you, especially, the current trend right now is to develop on main. So you're doing the hard part of doing that is you got to release code before it's all ready. Well, now you can, now you can do these experimental attributes. So you can add that attribute in there, and and actually the compiler will throw up an error. So you have to, I forgot exactly, I might have it in my code samples, what you have to do. But you actually have to, I think you have to basically suppress the error. To say, hey, I know this is experimental. Let me use it anyways. So pretty cool. Yeah, I do have it in here. So like I say, you'll get a compiler warning. All right. So because this is experimental, it'll say, for evaluation purpose only and subject to change or removal in future updates. And that's not my text. That's actually from Microsoft saying that. Bless you. And again, Microsoft's adding this from themselves, right? And part of the reason why they're doing this, well, they needed it for this version, right, of C#. It's at the end of my slides. They added something in here. I can't remember the name of it right now. That is not done. But they, again, when you're releasing every year, what are you going to do, right? Especially when you're open sourced, right? So they had an experimental attribute. So like I said, they have it for their own needs. Oh no, they'll execute.
It's just warning.
It's just a warning, right? And like I say, so so this experimental method, it has the experimental attribute on it, right? And so an attribute, by what I mean, they brackets and say experimental, right? So if I try to execute code with this, right, in my code, I'm gonna get a warning, right? Actually, it's not a warning; it's a compiler. Forget if it's an issue or an error, but so the compiler right away is telling you, hey, you're trying to use something that's not fully fleshed out yet. And as you can see from the message, it's saying that this is still being worked on, right? So be cautious using this because it could change. Well, again, prime example, so the next one, inceptors, that's what I was trying to think of, right? So Microsoft's introducing inceptors, right? But they're not done with it. And to the point of, because here's their problem. Microsoft committed to releasing C# every year. All right. And it's because they committed to doing .NET every year. Right. But some of the things they're working on, because again, if you're talking about a mature language, C#'s been around for over 20 years. So it's, a lot of the small things have been taken care of. Now they're doing these really, big things like this Inceptor thing that they're working on, right? They couldn't finish in a year. So, but also it's open source, so everything's out there, right? So how do you start getting it out there? But they want, in their example, they want this to get out because so Inceptor is really meant for the tool companies, right? Your Telerex and your dev components and that type of stuff. So they want those companies to be able to start having this, but they could put the experimental tag on there, and they have, right? So if I start using Inceptors as this example, I'll get the compile warnings, and I have to basically turn off the compile warnings. So yeah. So the last one, last big thing is Inceptors. It's exactly that, right? It allows you to intercept code in there, basically inject code in here. Think of like code generators, right? Where they're injecting code, at runtime, into the IL and so forth. Again, honestly, none of us are ever going to fool with this. This is pretty high level stuff, but it's there, right? It is a new feature. Another interesting thing, talking about like C# and Inceptors, and the project takes more than a year to complete. You'd actually be shocked. It's funny. Microsoft, what they're 140, 150,000 people. But when you find out how many actual developers there aren't that many. So last month, I was at a conference, and I was actually sitting at a bar with Scott Hunter. So Scott Hunter owns Azure engineering. All right, so all the Azure products, all the engineers that build. So not the system support people, but the people actually building the SDKs and everything, right? He's their boss, right? He has what did he say? 160 employees. Developing all the stuff for Azure. And I'm saying, like, goodness, great. And I'm like, are you talking about direct reports? He said, no, that is the whole division. So in C#, there's only like 20 full-time employees on C#. Not even that many, actually. That's the language team. That includes F# and even support for VB. So it's kind of interesting. Maintenance and that type of stuff. It is still around, but no new development. All right, so let's look at some code. I mean, I've been talking about slides, talking through things. And again, I have not looked at any of this code since I wrote it. So we'll see how well we can go through this. I'll just go in order because that's easy. So,
Okay.
yes, sir. Oh, I'm seeing it perfectly fine. Why don't you see it? There we go. And with that reminder, let me also get out of my, whoops. Wow. Okay. Oops. Now let me start Outlook because apparently that will do well. All right. So, so a couple of demos to show, and again, some of these are pretty simple, but so here and here we can see we can alias any type, right? So this is the whole thing. Like I said, it's kind of. No, but 250%, sure. No, actually, that's about what I normally present at. So what was this? Oh, so here, like you can see this. I've got this. Again, the big thing is I'm able to declare and initialize it in one line. Prior, it took a couple lines of code. That's really what we're getting here, right? And we're able to alias that, right? Honestly, unless you're doing graphical type stuff, and I don't really see a whole lot of usage of this. Of course, whether we say watch like next week you'll find it. Well, next week I hope you're not doing a whole lot of work, but the week after maybe you'll find some big use case for this. The collection expressions, like I say, it was interesting when I first saw these. I was like, okay. But then I didn't even have the example here, but I've seen some more things in here. But again, like we see, I can create an array real easily, right? It's all in one line of code. This is stuff we do, right? Not very often. I mean, normally you don't initialize your collections, your arrays at the same time, but sometimes you are, all right? But it's cool because we can see, I mean, it handles the 2D jagged arrays. It handles the, with variables in there, right? So it handles all your normal use cases, right? It's interesting. Like I said, what I didn't put in here, but what I find interesting, I can also do, if I say, list, so I'll do it how I normally do it, right? Strings equals new, right? This is exactly the way how I would normally write this line, right? You notice I've got my little 3-dotted thing. If I look here, it'll say I can simplify that. And again, I mean, I got rid of 2 characters, right? But it's smaller. And it's actually more concise because again, that new didn't matter that it said new. This tells me the same amount of code, right? So again, I think it makes it a little bit simpler. So I actually do like this. I do a whole lot of collection because again, I write a lot back in code. So this is more my realm.
You can also just start adding items to it right there where you can't do with the new.
Yes, exactly. Because I now can say, Dan, Bob, Joe. Again, and that, the old way, if I did this the old way, right? Strings 2, you could do it, but you have to do it like this, right? Dan, Bob, Joe. Hey, this is a super simplified example of this, right? But already you can see, even the super simplified, I've got more code out there, right? It's already taking up more space on the line. And normally you wouldn't have something this simple. It normally would be like, it could be something like, where I have, a set of objects, exactly. Where now I can create those a whole lot easier. So, oops. So really liking that.
Probably come in handy doing unit tests to figure a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. So on this next one here, we see, so here's the default lambdas. Again, I'm, half the time I have Visual Studio tell me here, you could write this simpler with a lambda, and I let it rewrite it for me. Because half the time I just can't remember all these things. But here we can see all this code is up on my GitHub, so you can go and get it. I've commented everything. So specify 0 inputs, right? With something pretty normal we would do. Well, I don't know how normal I would create an action that would do a console write, but you could do that. Again, we can see that I can get rid of those parentheses. I'm definitely, the more parentheses, the more brackets I can get rid of is a good thing to me. So just some really, again, it's just making the code a little more concise. It's funny that I'm the one who says this because I remember that, during the big debates against C# versus VB. And the biggest complaint I would hear from C# developers, well, VB is too verbose. And I always joked, I'm like, well, I like the verboseness, and also I type 140 words per minute. So what do I worry about the fact that I have to type 8 characters instead of 5 characters? Now I'm all about how many characters can I take out of my code, right? So it's kind of funny, right? World does go full circle. But at any rate, like I said, I really do find this interesting. There's some interesting things you do here. Again, half the time I have Visual Studio tell me what I could do it. Where did my Solution Explorer go?
Not just suggested, like you're typing along, it's like, yeah, that's what I want to write.
Well, I tell you, what, so sure enough, you'll notice I've got Copilot on here. Between Copilot and all the improvements I made on telecode, half the time I don't even need to write code. So today, I'm working on this workshop, and I will admit, I've noticed, I'm working on the hands-on piece right now, and I have noticed that I'm actually going a little bit overboard with this thing, and I've noticed I'm kind of showing off because this is for developers. I haven't even met the developers yet. All right, so this is the first experience they'll have with me is with this workshop I'm giving in 2 weeks. But at any rate, so I was writing a JSON document. I was making it a little bit more complicated because this is something we're going to be doing in a couple months, right? So where you could have like a generic document type, and the document will have a document type tells you, oh, this is a foo object. So deserializes the foo object. So I'm doing a JSON converter and all this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of code I'm having to write. It's so funny. I start writing it, and I hit enter, and Visual Studio dumps out like 30 lines of code. I'm like, yep, that's exactly what I needed, or pretty darn close. So it is pretty cool what what you can get, for free, or Copilot's not free, but it's not too bad. I don't pay for, huh?
$10 a month.
Yeah, I think it's what it was. Like I say, luckily I get it for free. But yeah, they've definitely done some nice with it. All right. All right. So again, here's that experimental. Like I say, I know I will start using this at some point. But you can see, like I've named that experimental. And so sure enough, you can see I purposely have commented these things out so I can compile things. But once I uncomment out right away, and it is errors, right? So I can't even, if I try to run this now, I mean, we all know what's going to do. It's going to tell you can't run this because I've got errors. All right. Now, as I said, I can go in here, and there should be in here. I can suppress this, right? So there is a way around it. But it is nice. Again, especially as a back-end developer, because I will write stuff that, where we want to get some of it out there, but not everything. And you got deadlines, you got to meet your sprints and what have you. So you can, we can start working on that way. So I have a feeling I haven't used it yet, but I have a feeling at some point I will. Inline arrays. So again, here we can, we can just see that uses the same way. It's just that the compiler knows more information when it does it, right? So, which makes the compiler faster, right? So this is, again, when you see how every release C# gets faster and faster, it's because they add stuff like this, helping the compiler do its work. The primary constructor, I use this every single day now. There we go. So if we were looking at this, so here we've got this distance class, right? Or it's a struct actually. So before primary constructor, I would have my read-only magnitude, my read-only direction, and I would have my my constructor here with doing all that kind of stuff, right? Not bad, right? I mean, and again, this is code we're all used to reading, and again, you'll see I've got the Visual Studio is making the suggestion, and it even says use a primary constructor, right? And sure enough, that's what we see down here. So down here, I've got the same thing. Notice I now just have 2 lines of code inside my class. It's just as readable, right? I didn't lose any readability. If anything, I've gained readability because I don't have to ignore these, right? This is now together with those constructors. So it just makes it a whole lot nicer. and it's just a little bit easier to read. Um,
I thought you mentioned they were assignable, so you got read only on those now.
no. So the struct itself is read only, but that's because it's a struct and it's different. Here, again, because here's the problem with these. I could go in here, let's just say I have a public read only foo. Oops. Sans, because foo. All right. And I could go in here. Oh, because that won't work with a read only. If I did like this, I can now say px equals whatever, right? So I've now changed this. And here, and the issue here, why is that not working?
I think it's public void.
Need your parentheses two after food.
There we go. I think this is where the struct does this differently, because I am actually getting an error. I don't know. I know this is one of the big complaints, and there's talk, or there's a request to basically add a read only into the parameters constructor. And Microsoft said, well, let's think about that. And it's not because it's not like they're ignoring everyone. It's how complicated we're going to make this language, right? And so, well, like here's a prime example. So here's where I know you'll see this, right? So if you look here again, here we've got this bank account, right? It's got some. I'm not reading my own comments right. Here we go. But again, I could start changing these values, and that's where we start getting some problems. Let me show you this other example that shows this a little bit better. Because one, again, I'll show this. Whoops, I meant to go this one. So again, here's a normal Azure function, right? I mean, this is hello world, all right? I don't know why I'm getting compiler errors on that though. Probably because I changed something that's made something uncompilable. But don't worry about that compiler error. But this is a pretty normal Azure function. You could see that I'm bringing in a service class. And again, if you ever attend my talks about Azure functions, I always talk about you should almost do nothing in your Azure function. All the real logic should be in a class library. So that's exactly what we're doing here. Yeah, Twitch apparently is only seeing a white background. Yeah, well, that's weird. Yeah. All right, now they're seeing my screen. Sorry about that, Twitch. So here, so like I say, this is a very normal Azure function, right? But here's the thing. All this is just fluff. It serves no real purpose other than the fact this is the way how C# works, right? Well, like I say, now, that same thing, all that's gone, right? And again, like I say, because an Azure function, it should have as least amount of code as possible. It should be doing just this one thing. I've made this a whole lot easier. Why is this complaining? And why is my hover not coming up? Let's do this. Let's close everything. It's probably because I must have made something. Well, we can just do this. Well, luckily again, I don't have to do that. I can just undo all my changes. Well, I could apparently be told what's new. All right, so now. Oh. Oh, it's missing. Huh. I've got a whole class library. It's missing. That's what the problem is. All right. So yeah, that definitely would be a problem. Experimental doesn't help with missing stuff. Well, anyway, but the point being, I can now put this all up here again. It just makes my Azure function smaller, easier to read. Technically, this could, in theory, save me money because with Azure functions, the code actually gets stored in Azure storage. I've yet to ever actually pay for my Azure storage accounts that my Azure functions are tied to. But in theory, if I had a whole lot of code in here, this could actually reduce the amount of code, right? Because it does all spaces. Okay. I've already tried it. Well, no, it's a. All right, so Azure Functions, you have to have a storage account associated with it, which there's multiple things it uses that storage account for, but one of the things it uses, that's where it actually stores the code that gets spun up into the virtual machine that then gets multi-initialized. But the thing is, with every storage account, you have to go so far before you. Oh my goodness! Oh, now that's a spam call. You have to use so much before you start paying for it. I've never had an Azure function, and I've had some very active Azure functions that have ever had cost me money on that. I had to pay for them because I've done enough work to I had to pay for the function itself. But so, all right. So like I said, I really love this. Oh, what I was going to talk about. Here's the one thing in theory here. See how well this works since I'm missing my library. But if I was to, the thing is, I could actually say service equals new iService. Oh, new foo service, right? I can't actually reference it since I'm missing my class library. So the right squiggly is not because of this. The right squiggly is I'm missing a project, right? I could actually override the service, and in dependency injection, that's a no-no, right? The things you inject in there, they're generally coming from a singleton or something similar to that. So technically, this is a bad thing, right? This is something you wouldn't want to do. Now, with that being said, what I've been doing and what I've seen several others do is. I will add a little bit more code in here. I'll have my private read-only iService service. Right? And again, it's using normal naming because I know a module level variable should have an underscore, as part of its naming, right? So, and same thing with a logger, right? Because again, you could override that logger. Well, actually, the logger usually you'll do a private read-only logger. Usually, you would bring in an iLogger factory. So, the point is, this is So I am adding a little bit of code. I'm not getting rid of as much, but I am getting rid of that constructor. Which again, that constructor serves absolutely. If you look at these constructors, they never really serve any real purpose. They're just there because that's the way how you have to build a constructor, right? So that part of it is really nice. All right. Then this last one, again, I don't find this all that useful, but it's in here. And definitely, I would say, if you start coming to these issues, definitely read the documentation here. But again, here, if I do so if I'm doing something by ref, right, which is not normally anymore, but I can now add in that read only, right? So I now have that in here, and you can actually see, how it's getting used, right? Because I have the end, I have the ref, because basically, these weren't necessarily, what was it? The end was not read only, the ref was. That's where some of the confusion got to be. So like I say, there's some really nice things that got added to C#. There's some things that, they're not, they're not really for us. All right. But definitely some nice things that got done in here. All right. Let me switch this back to go to my next section here. So, whoops, I want to do that. Which should automatically change that back. But then this time I'll remember to change it on Twitch. Maybe. There we go. Too many clicks, though. All right. Not that you're seeing all my clicks. I just realized that I'm clicking a whole bunch. You're not even seeing it. All right. So the next section here. So, .NET. Big thing is making .NET faster. I think that's the biggest thing. Microsoft is definitely in a competition to keep themselves the fastest. And they have, right? They're not necessarily always the fastest, but they're always in the top 5, right? And if you look at the margin between the top 3 and 5, I mean, there's very little difference, right? Well, sometimes it's done. It just depends. Seems to depend on the week. It also does depend on the metrics that were used to generate it. No, it would be Rust. Yeah, Rust would definitely, and Go. Though, generally, it's between Rust, Go, and .NET nowadays. Well, again, depends on the metrics the tests you run it against and so forth. But so you can see there's a lot of things that get listed. We don't have all night, so we're not going to talk about everything in here. Some really big things I definitely want to talk about. Some things I'm not going to go in detail, but one of the things, especially since I have, a queen of accessibility here, some really nice things I made with the globalization, which is sort of accessibility, mm-hmm. But so now they have this whole hybrid globalization mode, and this is a whole thing for iOS and Mac TV, tvOS, right? So if you're doing things on there, you've got some better globalization tools in there. Something else I'm not going to go into great detail. It made some changes in NuGet. So now it will actually, so it's funny, prior to .NET 8, they were not verifying signed packages on Linux. So if you're building on Linux, then you actually go verify the signed packages from, that's kind of oh my God, how did you let that go for that long? Windows has always done it, has done it for the longest time. Now they both do the same thing. Again, boils down to they're getting more and more usage on Linux, so they need to fix those kind of things. And then the other thing, I didn't put a whole lot of slides on here, but C# hot reload now supports modifying generics. And that is actually a big deal. But there's not a whole lot to show with it. But half the time, what I've noticed is I'm having to, I'm able to do hot reload even more often than I was before. All right, so that's nice.
That's really impressive.
Yeah. So, all right, so some things, and we were talking about this prior. So one of the big things they announced, and this was kind of a surprise. They did, there wasn't Even in the MVP world, this was more of a surprise. There wasn't a whole lot of talk about this in the MVP world. We knew they were doing something, but we didn't know the name. So Aspire. So for years, there's been Project Tie, right? And basically, this is the next step of Project Tie. So Project Tie is still there. Project Tie is the whole idea of containerization, right? Taking your ASP.NET Core applications and containerizing them, and working with Dapper, right? Of course, in the C# world, we have two different Dappers. I'm talking about the Dapper, the one that does all the containerization type work and passing messages back and forth, not Dapper, the ORM. But one of the coolest things I loved when they announced Aspire is that it's opinionated. One of my big complaints about Microsoft over the past, especially 10 years, is they've gone to this whole thought of, well, we don't want to be opinionated. We want to give you a plethora of options. And I'm like, no, I would like you to be more opinionated. I would like you to tell me how to develop this, right? You all are experts, and I would love to know how I'm supposed to do this. So I love the fact that that's, so this, their official wording is it's an opinionated cloud-ready stack for building observable, production-ready, distributed applications. So it's really cool what they've done here, right? So it helps with your orchestration. So when you talk about containers, you'll be running multiple containers that are doing different things. The example they use a lot is you'll have an ASP.NET site, and you'll have like a Redis container that's doing your memory, your in-memory storage of key values and such. And prior to this, you did have Tie, right? But Tie, you would have to go in there. You have to start Project Tie. You have to have configuration files for Tie and all this kind of stuff. Aspire is working to make that whole lot simpler. When I click F5, it does all that console work I had to do prior, right? It also is making it easier to build those configuration files because it's actually building it for you, especially with the update that just came out with this week. So, and again, at the end of the slide, this section, I'll show some slides, and I know I have, I'll show what this looks like, but it's pretty cool what they've done. Well, I'm trying to remember I didn't write notes in here. Okay, yeah. So it's pretty cool what they've done. All right. I'm trying to remember what this slide was supposed to be about. Because I have a bunch of libraries, I have no notes in my comments. And like I said, I wrote this a month ago. Obviously, these are, okay, well, I mean, there are things that have definitely changed. Serialization, I don't remember what they've done in serialization. They've abstracted more stuff with time. Again, about 3 or 4 years ago, you got the time only and date only. They're still pretty limited, but they made some more abstractions with time to make time only a little more improved. A lot of this, again, you see things that are improved for performance. The stream-based zip file methods are pretty cool. Again, just making it easier as a .NET developer to zip up my things, and so I can make them smaller and send them out smaller packages. Serialization. Oh, maybe that's what this is all about. Maybe I've got. Oh, okay. I really should have looked at these slides right before I present. That was actually my preview of all these things I'm going to talk about. So serialization. So some things here, just a whole lot of improvements, right? So remember, and still you see this a lot. You've got Newtonsoft, right? The JSON.NET library that Microsoft used a whole lot. And like 6 years ago, something like 4 or 6 years ago, somewhere in that time frame, Microsoft came out with the system.text.json library, and with really the intent of getting it to replace JSON.NET. And again, for those who haven't heard my spiel about it before, don't feel so sorry for an open source developer. He actually works for Microsoft, and he actually is the first one to tell you stop using JSON.NET. But here's the whole problem. JSON.NET still even after .NET 8 has things that the system.text.json doesn't have, and probably never will have. for the most part. But so we can see a whole lot of things that they got handled here. Handling missing members is really nice. It's interesting. I thought they would do they would do more with this. The big thing is you can basically air off if you've got missing members. I don't know. Normally, I want to ignore if I've got missing members if it's a nullable field, right? This is even if it's a nullable field. If it's missing, it will. You can set it to air off. Again, built-in support for more types. That's always a good thing. But a lot of these things also are just to speed things up. Non-public members is really nice. That was one of the big problems we had. So, like if you got your protected members right in there, you can now get those to deserialize. Prior to this, you had to write custom converters to handle that kind of stuff. So definitely some really nice things to hear. I just read my note down. I'm not going to talk about everything. Read-only properties are now supported. That was another thing that I had to write JSON converters for. So just making things, the naming policies have gotten better. So actually naming policies are really nice. So what they've done. So prior, I can either have, it's case, the JSON is cased the exact same way my POCO class is, or I could do a camel case, right? So where the first letter is small, but every new word is a capital letter. That was built in. Now they've added in like snake case, which, so you can add in, I think they added something else in, I can't remember off the top of my head. But, so they added some more things, for naming, which is just nice. Because again, JSON, there is no actual standard to it. I mean, in theory, the standard is that keys are Pascal or camel cased, but they're not necessarily, all right? Because someone could generate them a different way. All right, I already talked about that. So the other types they added, types you probably won't use a whole lot. Half, int 128, uint 128, an int 128. That is a humongous number. You're going to be doing some serious math if you're using that. Memory, read-only memory, which is used with, I can't remember what it's used with right now. I forgot. It's thinking in my head. I went too far. So also now, and this is really cool, byte values are now serialized to a base 64, which again, that's really what you want it to be. I can interface hierarchies, which is nice. I talked about the naming policy. Oh, kebab case. So snake case is where it's all lowercase letters with then underscores in between the words. Kebab is so all small with dashes in between the words, right? So that's the difference between. So they've added these things in here. Again, nice because, like I said, because JSON does come from different places, so it's not unusual to see things formatted a different way. Like I said, they can handle read-only properties. They can handle non-public members. And then the streaming, they added better streaming, so I can do it faster. All right. So time abstraction. So the big thing here is you've got a time provider. This helps with that. With your UTC times, or converting in between times, and attaining of timestamps. So lots of things you can do with that. So here we can see examples here of things we can do in here. Some random methods I was talking about here. So this is interesting. Random of all things got added things. So I can now actually, so the randoms get items. I can actually, it will randomly get a specified number of items from a collection. Again, these are things that we do, and we've had to write weird code to make this happen, and now it's just in .NET, right? The shuffle will let you randomize the order of a span, right? So so that's actually kind of cool, right? It's pretty cool stuff we can do in there. Some performance stuff they've added in here. So these frozen collections, I gotta remember this. Yeah, so once you have a frozen collection, basically you can you can put your values in there so you can initialize it, but then they're frozen, right? So you can't change them afterwards. So you say, well, why would I want to do this? Well, think about a lot of times, especially if you have a really large collection, all right, you're not changing those values. You're probably reading through it. You're probably searching for it. But there's a lot of memory being taken because it's a writable collection. Well, now with this frozen, right? I can get this thing. It's frozen, so I can't change it. Well, guess what? Now they could take away a lot of memory, or, give you back a lot of memory because it doesn't take as much memory to keep that, to keep it in memory. All right. So really nice things you could do there. I haven't used it yet, but I can definitely see using that. So within your buffers, I don't do a whole lot of buffers, but within here, I can, it's designed to get past methods that look for first occurrence of a value within a buffer, right? If you are doing a lot of streams, you'll see a lot. You'll use that. Your composite format. So here's an example here. Basically, this is useful for optimizing string format strings. It's interesting, also IntelliSense has changed a lot on how they're handling string formatting. But it's just, again, it's one of the biggest performance drains in C# is actually string manipulation, and it's not a fault of C# or .NET. It's just string manipulation is hard, right? Most languages have issues with string manipulation, especially. I mean, if you ever done an interview with me, especially for a junior developer, one of the questions I will always ask you is, why would I use a string array, right? And it's because string, every time I change it, I have to, it's not mutable, right? I have to destroy it and recreate it, right? So it's part of the whole thing. We're trying to make that better, right? Well, not we, Microsoft's trying to make that better. So things with hashing, so if you're doing some crypto type stuff, and I don't mean crypto, not the scam crypto stuff. I mean, cryptography. This becomes really important. Especially, you think about, quantum computing is coming, and so we've got to figure out better ways to hash our stuff because quantum computing is going to break everything that we have today. Some nice data validations that got added in here, right? So there's already data valid. So you have your data annotations. With that, I can actually do data validations, and honestly, they're pretty simplified. That's why there's actually some really nice libraries out there, like Fluent Expressions is really nice, or Fluent Validation, I should say, is really nice. It's much better than the data validation built in the .NET. But Microsoft is addressing that, right? With that being said, Fluent, you're still going to use Fluent Validation more, right? It's going to do a lot more for you. But so some nice things here, right? This minimum is exclusive minimum. Why did I write that twice? Oh, maximum. I'm not reading it right. So the hard part, when you talk about minimums and maximums, well, are we including that maximum value, right? Is it 0 to 255, or is it really 0 to 254, right? That's kind of things you could do with here. And again, I can do those validations. I can now validate against a length, making sure that it meets a minimum length and a maximum length, right? These are some things that we would normally do. Allowed values, right? Hey, here are the values I'm going to allow, all right? Validate this. So just some nice things in there. And again, especially, I mean, if you're an ASP.Razor developer, these are things you're going to use, right? Because makes that development a whole lot easier. There's support for the HTTPS proxy. That is really important in that world. Again, for most of us, we get the benefits out of that. We don't deal with it, but it is in there. I talked about this. So stream-based zip file methods. Zipping is not an easy process to do. Now I can stream it, which means it's going to take less memory because it's doing it as it goes and it's dumping the memory as it finishes. But notice I can create from directory, I can extract to directory, right? So it's making it very simple to do those kind of things. Anyone doing Linux development? So this is the big thing for or Mac. Well, Mac is Linux. So really big push on this native AOT, and this is like they've been working. I mean, well, since .NET Core, they've been working on this type of stuff. Here's the whole thing about the whole idea with AOT, ahead of time development. So if you think about what C# was built for, what .NET was built for, it was built for just in time, right? So the whole idea of I compile my code down to IL, but then it doesn't actually compile it down to what the system understands until I need it, right? And they've made that very, very fast, and so it works well. But when you go to the Linux world, when you go to the Mac world, which is Linux, you need this ahead of time, right? Especially for ARM development, right? So if you think about the Windows world, we're Intel based, right? Intel, has really, has set our world forever. But the Intel base it's not keeping up with ARM. It's not as expedient, but more importantly, it's much hotter, right? And by that I mean, it takes a lot more energy to run an Intel core processor, or even a regular AMD processor. So it's not just Intel; it's the technology. Whereas with ARM, right, I now have these much more efficient, lower energy units, and you have to do AOT for that, right? Because in order for it to be less power consumption, they can't do all this compiling on the run. So they've been adding a whole lot of support for this. Again, so big things, right? So ARM64 is now supported. Mac OS is supported. I am on stream, so I will not say things. Ask me about what I saw at Tech Bash afterwards. I saw something really cool. I am not going to say in a public forum, but I'll say around drinks. But talking about ARM, right? So I did see something really, really cool. So, and again, just talking about what Microsoft is doing with ARM. So again, the other big thing is now they've reduced the size on Linux, right? Think about most Linux devices are not your big desktop computers, are generally very small devices. So that's really important. And to give you an example here, .NET 7. .NET 7 was a whole lot smaller than .NET 6, all right? So .NET 7 on a Linux 64 bit, I go from 376 to 184. It's like half, right? And on Windows, I go 285 to 177. It started smaller to begin with, right? But we're just getting smaller things, right?
But yeah, was that because of code reduction or more efficient?
No, think about it. They've added a whole lot more code.
So how's it be more efficient?
They've rewritten a lot of things. Again, the other thing because it's ahead of time, right? So I'm able to get rid of a lot of the compilers, right? Because I don't need those anymore. Again, most development everyone's doing, especially if you're not doing Linux development, you're still doing Jet, right? If you're doing ASP.NET, you're doing Jet, right? But eventually, we're going to get more and more onto AOT because AOT still needs more work. But the other cool part was now there's a .NET Console app that's got that's actually got a template built for it, right? So you can actually because most things I'm building for Linux is probably a console app anyways. And yeah, I can target the iOS platform, so your iOS, but also your iOS simulators, right? Work with all this. And then just in general, lots of performance improvements, right? Again, we see those ARM64 performance improvements. The big goal is to be able to run Windows on an ARM machine. What's out there today, it's too slow, right? You can do it. If you got a user is just doing web pages and everything, it works fine. But once you actually start, quote unquote power user, right? Not even what level any of us are doing, it starts really slowing down. So there's not a whole lot of improvements there. A lot of improvements for cloud native. So when you're doing your containers and that type of stuff, some improvements there. I talked about the jet, but they've improved the jet, right? So even the jet is going faster, right? So it can get through it faster. And again, we're talking about, how .NET is, keeps on getting, faster and faster and, competing, if you look at it like 10 years ago, .NET was lucky to be in the top 10 prior to .NET Core, right? As far as, target frameworks. Now they're consistently there, right? It was bad, .NET was faster than Java. It's almost always been faster than Java, but not by much at first, right? And I do like the bag on Java, so. Oh, apparently I have automation there. Some other SDK enhancements. So, there we go. So, what was this? Oh, okay, so these are just some things added into MS Build. So I can actually, again, if you're doing some interesting build things, I can now, do some more analysis on my build as I'm running them. I must have an automation here that I don't expect. I can also do my outputs a lot nicer. And I can simplify my output paths. The other nice thing is there's now this .NET workload clean. So again, just cleaning up your stuff, especially if you compile a whole bunch of times, you want to clean it. Your publish and pack assets, it just made improvements on these. I'm going to skip through these here. All right, next, containers, lots of improvements for working with containers. They're doing, image defaults. So again, I like to talk about earlier when I talked about Aspire, how finally they're being opinionated. This is one of those examples, right? They're being opinionated and they're actually doing some things here. Support for Debian 12, which apparently is getting more and more popular. Support for non-root users, or more importantly, that .NET doesn't have to be the root user, which that's an important security feature, right? So just some nice things. And apparently we have composite images. But again, just making it better for publishing your containers, right? Again, think about Aspire. I talked about it's for doing containers, right? And they really are trying to get more and more people into containers. So this kind of stuff is really important to handle that stuff. Yeah. Some other important things here. So they some new code analysis rules. So if you live in my world, this is really important to me because I look at these things. This is the way, when I do a code review and I look at these, I'm like, well, can you at least first look at your warnings? So they've added some more things in here. Most important one in here is this one here. Determining a collection type has any elements is better than to use length, count, or is empty. So here's the thing. A couple years ago, I was harped on. If you're ever going to look at a collection, you want to know whether or not it has values. You should use the any value because that was for a while. It was the fastest way to look because it didn't actually enumerate through the collection. Well, that's no longer the case. Now, length and count or is empty is more performant than any. So you actually will get it's a warning message. So so it's the lowest level, right? But it is telling you, hey, you should change that. That's so funny because I remember I was actually on a Twitch stream when someone showed me how the performance of that. But like I say, nowadays it's the other big one here. What did I say? Throw helpers are simpler and okay, basically just so the argument null exceptions, the argument exceptions. Basically, they're saying, hey, use these. That's the reason why we put it in here. So we put so they've done this. Actually, this is funny. I just saw something. What was that? Oh, apparently, because I don't have a slide about it. I just saw this today or yesterday. So if you ever built custom exceptions classes, right? So, foo exception, inherent exception. And of course, I would always get the warnings prior. Oh, you got to add your serializer. I never do binary serialization, but okay, I'm going to get the warning. It's going to tell me that, Sonar Cloud is going to tell me, hey, you need to put that serialization constructor in there. They've actually obsoleted the serializer thing. So it's actually recommended don't put it in there. And it's funny, I was reading the documentation about it. It's like, yeah, we haven't serialized an exception for like 10 years. It's been in there for the longest time, but we didn't actually do anything with it. So, all right, I'm going to not go to the demos now. I'm going to just go through these slides and then we'll go to the demos because I'm already at 8:16. So Blazor, look, if you really want to ask about Blazor, Ed will be here next month. He's the guy to talk about Blazor, even though he's not going to be talking about Blazor next month. But at any rate, here's the big thing about Blazor. It's Blazor United, right? So think about this. If you worked with Blazor, or if you haven't worked with Blazor, here's how it's been. You had Blazor server, and you had Blazor client, right? And the idea was Blazor server basically was web apps, or not web forms, just the grown-up version of web forms. And I don't say that's a bad thing because I actually loved web forms. I thought they were a great thing, and I knew how not to get into the traps that most people got into. Basically don't depend on view state. But at any rate, so you had the server version, and it was exactly that, right? All the code ran on the server, and then would send the page logic, the HTML, to the client. The client version, guess what it did? It ran on the client machine, right, in the sandbox. So it was somewhat limited, right? It still is, right? Because obviously it's in a sandbox. Certain things you can't do. You don't want people to do. They've kind of gotten away from that. And again, I'm not the best explainer of this. Like I was mentioning right before, I'm starting to relearn Blazor because where I'm at now, we're using Blazor, so I need to actually relearn it. But now you've got this whole United thing, and basically we've got the hybrid mode, right? So it will know to switch. Okay, we'll do some on the server, some on the client. Get the best of both worlds is what it's basically doing. So some really nice stuff it's doing. It does allow me to do static rendering of HTML. Far. So here's some of the big benefits you can see with what they're doing here. They're rendering the content, basically closer to what we want to do. We've got a new web template. I think that's the biggest thing is that from my understanding, there's enough changes here that it's not like you're just going to, so the .NET, the idea behind .NET nowadays is to go from 6 to 7, 7 to 8. It's simple, change it from 7 to 8 in my project file, recompile, and I'm done, right? Generally, that's all you have to do. My understanding with Blazor, there's a lot more you got to do, right? So you actually have to go through a migration process. So no shocker, there's a new web template. There's new JavaScript initializers. I always joke, I'm like, I was promised no more JavaScript. You still do JavaScript with Blazor, just not as much. But so they've added. It doesn't show up very well on the screen, but before web start, after web started, before server start, so you can see where these would be benefit, where I can kick off some JavaScript type things. Form handling is better now. Enhanced navigation and form handling. I was happy to see that. They're now streaming the rendering. Again, this is just making it faster, right? Especially when you're running, when it's running from the server, because obviously there's a delay there. Now I don't have to wait for the whole thing to start showing up on the page. And I can render components outside of ASP.NET Core. Quick grid, so they built a new grid. And they've also have added UI for identity, which that's a good thing because they were missing that. All right, some other things. So SignalR, basically, it's getting faster, and they're handling just better things to handle things. The stateful reconnect is really nice because that was sometimes a problem with single R. Minimal APIs, I don't know. I'm not a fan of minimal APIs. I find them a waste of time. But you can override the culture, language, talking about that. I can bind them to forms. And I've got better anti-forgery, something that I had in MVC web APIs for the longest time. We can now do minimal APIs. Can you tell I'm not really a fan of minimal APIs? I don't know. Again, we've already, we already talked about native AOT, but just some more stuff now. More talking about in the ASP.NET world. So again, just notice that I can get this create slim builder, so it'll build the smallest but ASP.NET website that is the least generated web page. And you got this create empty builder. It will create an actually empty builder, empty site. So nice, reducing the app size, app size. And, just some trimming done here. And then finally, I don't think Microsoft went far enough with this. And I've actually talked to some folks in Microsoft about this. So, Microsoft has realized that authentication has become really hard, right? It's always been hard, but it's interesting. If you look, especially if you look like pre.NET Core, right? If I was doing an ASP.NET website, identity wasn't that hard, right? Because it was built in. I can actually just run it. It wasn't the most secure thing in the world, but it worked, right? And it worked for most situations. Especially, because it had the form based and it had the the identity or the Windows Server base, right? The Windows Server base was very strong. The form base, it depended on cookies and wasn't the strongest thing in the world. So they're working on trying to make this better. Here's where again they won't go to an opinionated point. So they did do research. Do we make a new identity thing? Basically to compete against like identity server and what have you. And they've decided no. I think that's a mistake. I wish they would. All right. Because authentication is hard and it's expensive. It's horribly expensive because it's hard. All right. So then real quick, Entity Framework. Actually, Entity Framework, the .NET 8 release, there's some nice stuff in here, but it's not like even as big as .NET 7 was. All right. Not to say that it's not an impactful release. And actually the only thing I put on here are the complex types. I have not used this yet. I actually need to reread the documentation on this again because I do need to look at this more. But the idea here is, let's say you have, do I have an example? I'm trying to see if I have an example so I can talk through an example. 1 second. I know you don't see my screen. Yeah, let me show you an example because I'll have an easier time. Yeah. Oh, well. Okay, well, let me make sure I'm sharing it on stream. I am not. Well, I didn't think I was sharing it there either. Whoops, not slides. Stop and share it again. Okay, so all right, so I'll go with Entity Framework first, just because that's where we're at. So whoops. So here's kind of where you can see this, right? Okay, yeah. So think about where you have like an address, right? So your address is probably have it in multiple type places, right? Same structure, right? Probably same stuff. But you probably are copying and pasting that, those tables around and so forth. So what they're showing here is I can actually create this as a complex type, right? And then in my order, I have that address, and it's a shipping address, a billing address, in the customer. Again, so I'm not having to redefine this every single class, right? I just have that address and it's getting used. This is different than having a separate class, than having an address class that gets used. And I'm trying to remember exactly why. Because it's the way how any framework generates the code, it generates the SQL tables. Basically, trying to remember what it does. Oh, it will create it actually inside there. This will actually create this complex type will actually create a table called address. I don't know. Like I said, honestly, when I wrote this demo, I was looking at this again. I need to look at this again some more. Again, I started a new job, so I've been going through a fire hose for the past fourth week now. So I need to go back through this again. I'm not so sure how much I like it. I was noticing some things I just didn't like the way how I was creating the tables. Again, for those who've never worked with me before, I prefer database first over code first. So that's probably part of the reason why I'm having a little bit of a hard time with it. And not to say you can't. I mean, I use code first also, but I like database first. But anyway, they've built that in here. It is interesting in here. You can even see I can have nested types in here. So I've got this. I've got this address. I've got this phone number. And in here you can see I can have these multiple types in here. So I don't know. It's interesting. Definitely worth looking at. I don't know if I will use it just yet. Let me look through data. Anything? Well, again, I thought these were interesting. The random stuff. I really did think this was kind of cool. Here you can see, I can go get an array of console colors, and where am I? Oh, here, this is just printing the. Oh, because in here is where I actually do it. So here you can see, so that was just a simple print all the color, right? But here, like I can, I took their code, but I changed the demo code to use colors. But so if you look at my demo, so this, here you can see, I can random share, get items. So it's just, it just makes it easier to go get a random item from here. So I thought it was pretty cool. And I know at some point, I'll end up using this, shuffle all the colors and then give me the shuffled data, right? So that's kind of cool. I'm trying to wrap up. Just trying to see anything interesting here. Well, again, all this code is out on my, so GitHub/Taylor Code, and you'll find this all out there. Just trying to see anything that I really want to talk about. No, I think that pretty much does it. So here's the thing. .NET 8, it's interesting. I think we're starting to see where, technically, even if you look like, when I did this presentation last year for .NET 7, I think I had more things to talk about for .NET 7 than I did for .NET 8. But, it doesn't mean that it's not an impactful release. But I think what we're seeing is how much stuff can you do in 1 year, right? And how much stuff can you add to a language that's over 20 years old, right? But with that being said, we're definitely seeing some nice things. Again, I love the fact that they're doing all these. Oh, I don't have the. I wanted to show. I do know what I wanted to show here. Let me just go to a new. Let me just close this. I do want to show one more thing. So let me create a new project. I will go to. Let me remember how to do this. Oh, I probably didn't install Aspire on this machine. You have to install Aspire separately. And I haven't done it on my laptop. I did it on my desktop. So I can't show it off. It is pretty cool because So when you launch the Aspire, that's what I want to show is when you launch it, it actually comes up with a dashboard first, and we'll show you some general status of the containers, showing them how they're working with each other. What's really cool is when there's errors, you get it right there on the console app or dashboard app. So I really find that's going to be really nice. Again, I think you're still going to use tools like Grafana and that type of stuff. But I think this is going to, Grafana is great, but not for developers. I think Grafana is more for the quote unquote, I don't know, DevOps is kind of bastardized nowadays, right? It's a whole, DevOps, the whole idea was that it's not supposed to be specialized, but it is specialized. But so Grafana is great for those DevOps people, right? The people that's where their world is getting the stuff out, out in production and needing to monitor that stuff. The dashboards built in here, I think, are easier for developers to look at because it's looking simply at what I really care about, my code and where did the error happen. So some nice things they built in there. But so long story short, where I was going is, we're definitely seeing, we're getting more to evolutionary changes instead of revolutionary changes. Outside of Aspire. Aspire was definitely a more revolutionary change. Again, that big thing about it being opinionated and actually saying, here's how you're going to do things. Any questions?
Just one thing I heard was, I don't know all the details, but they were saying that when they basically recompiled the projects in .NET, increased their SQL transactions by decrease like a third, almost a third, like a quarter of a third.
Oh, really? I somehow missed that then.
Didn't that start in 7? The whole,
Yes.
I remember Phil talked about that when he was here, about how it combines things together instead of sending separate commands.
Well, like I say, again, the big thing you see with any of the .NET teams, .NET, C#, any framework, all those, performance is their biggest thing that they want to work on every time. All right. With any framework, I don't know the stats this time around, but, so with EF Core 6, their goal for 7 was to be faster than Dapper, which was saying a lot. Dapper is super, super fast and does things that would make it faster than any framework, right? They didn't beat Dapper, but they got really darn close. And I know they still have the goal to beat Dapper. Of course, it's a moving target. This Dapper keeps on getting faster also, right? And Dapper is a very lightweight ORM. It doesn't do the code first. I mean, so you, pretty cool actually. Like it kind of reminds me of old, what's the technology, the actual technology you're using to, ADO. That's what I was trying to remember. It reminded me of my old ADO development days, right? When you have to write more stuff yourself. So for Jose, so sure enough, he asked where my slides are at. So all the slides are out of my GitHub repo. I'm not sharing my screen anymore. I'm sharing it here. I'm not sharing on stream. But here I will put the link up here. So if you go to that repo, you will find all my slides and all the demo code. It's all out there. Although apparently I have missing a project in my demo code, so it won't compile. Just take out the Azure function, and the rest of everything will compile. Huh? Yeah. Well, and since it's probably the only time I'll do this presentation, I'm not going to go in and fix it, but or maybe I will just because that's annoying me that I've got a broken. I'm trying to figure out how that broke. Somehow it didn't get pushed up there. All right, well, cool. All right, so everyone on the stream, thank you for joining. I really do appreciate it. Next month, I didn't talk about it before. Well, I mentioned during the talk. All of us. What did I talk about a whole lot today? And Joel Spelunky, it's harder to read code than to write it. And what was I talking about? A whole lot of stuff they did. They made code a lot easier to read. that just randomly came up. My random generator pulled that up. So that's pretty darn cool. So next month, we will have Ed, God, Charbonneau. I was going to say a completely different name for some reason. So Ed's coming. He's going to be doing his talk about what was the name of the talk? Something about null, or a lot about null. I forgot the actual title. It's a clever title. This session was intentionally left null, which my joke is, so is it nothing? And again, I'm an old VB developer. Null in VB is nothing. Literally, that's the name of it. It's called, huh? So that will be January. I am working on filling up the schedule. Sure enough, Arissa, I want to talk to you about that. But yeah, so it's been interesting. I had some other speakers, but then so Guy Royce is going to come sometime soon to talk. He was actually coming. Well, he originally was going to come in January. There was a reason why it got moved over to January. But then his company said, "Yeah, you need to stop traveling for a little while, and we need you to do AI." But Guy is dedicated to come spring probably. Funny thing was, I got Michael Eden. Michael's a good friend of mine up in Columbus. He was coming in May, and then he went to go book his hotel, and there were no hotel rooms. So apparently, our third week of May is that's PGA Championships, and so all the hotels are booked. The very few rooms you can get, like at the Econo Lodge, are like $800 a night. And I wish I was joking. And I actually was Red Roof. I saw that $800 a night. I was like, okay, yeah, right.
Anyone who wants to get tickets for the eclipse and that region where we travel, probably get them now. The prices are still pretty cheap if you want to travel for the 2024 eclipse.
So sure enough, lots of great things coming up. All right, so let me end the stream. And